Thanks, Mahapatra sir, for a nice introduction. And good afternoon to everyone. So I'm very grateful to the department and then all the faculty members for giving me this opportunity. And as Mahapatra sir mentioned, I am mostly working in the field of climate change mitigation as well as the aspects of green cooling, specifically focusing on mostly on the business aspects of it and then the policy aspects of this mitigation side as well as the green cooling side of it. And I'm looking forward to talking with you today about this topic, the transition to sustainable cooling solution. So let's start. So in this presentation, basically, I'll be talking about briefly, what exactly I'm going to cover it as a sustainable cooling solution. What does the sustainable cooling solution mean? And what would be the impact of whether it is on the climate impact or whether it is the impact on the ozone layer from the cooling sector? Then what kind of international treaties that are basically controlling the use of refrigerant or the cooling aspects of. Then briefly I will be talking about the space cooling demand, particularly focusing on the India side. So recently we did one project for the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Climate Change for India. So basically, MOEFCC is responsible government organization who is dealing with different international communities to reduce the impact of cooling on the from climate point of view. And then I'll be talking. I'll be talking about some low carbon cooling technologies, which basically help in reducing the greenhouse gas emissions as well as reducing the impact on the ozone layer. That's how I'm dividing the whole presentation. So let's get started with what is sustainable cooling solutions. What does sustainable cooling solution mean? So sustainable cooling doesn't mean that an air conditioner or a refrigerator in every household, right? It means basically providing more clean and affordable cooling solutions to address the needs of the people. So if you talk about the needs of the people, there are different types of needs. If you can see the left hand side of it, of this particular slide, there is a need for access to comfort and safety. So access to safe comfort and safety means that is cooling is required for our living, for working, for mobility. Mobility means for transportation, the kind of air conditioner that we are using in our cars. So basically, when we are talking about cooling for living or cooling for working, that means the space cooling in buildings. That particular segment is called space cooling in buildings. And when we are talking about cooling for mobility, that is the air conditioner that is being used in our cars, that is called mobile air conditioning segment. Then another needs that is called the access to nutritious food, that is the food and nutrition. So for transporting all perishable items like vegetables, fruit, grains, etc., that requires a cooling devices from one place to another. So therefore the agriculture sector that should have access to the sustainable cooling solutions. So that means we need refrigeration systems, or you need cooling in the cold chain. Also, third aspects of this cooling needs, that is called the health and care. So basically this requires cooling for preservation of medicines and vaccines. So during this COVID time, so there is a lot of discussion was going on related to the current India's infrastructure related to the cold chain for the vaccine sector. And luckily, India is having that kind of an infrastructure which can provide the vaccines to every household. So that kind of a infrastructure that we have right now. So this is the need, I mean, basic three needs for sustainable cooling solutions. And whenever we talk about providing sustainable cooling solution, that means access to clean and affordable cooling solutions. So clean means which will have reduced impact on the climate, right? So that access to clean and affordable cooling solution that can be provided through an optimized five solution approach. These five solution approach that is called protect, reduce, shift, improve, and leverage. So we will talk about this, five solution approach in the next slides. And this five solution approach that can be integrated to a four solution pillars. That those four solution pillars that are called basically technology, services, policy, and financial. So I'm mostly working in the field of in the solution pillar of policy side of it, and some part of the financial side of it. Okay. So I'll just talk about the five solution approaches. The first one, that is the protect, right? Protect, that means basically it measures. I mean, this protect is all about those measures that protect people, businesses, governments from the heat waves by using some sort of a sustainable cooling solutions which are basically affordable, safe, and reliable. Then the second solution, that is called the reduce. So reduce means, so you have to reduce the cooling demand by applying some technologies or some strategies. So those strategies, it can be the passive cooling technologies which are related to urban planning, design of a particular building, or using some natural solutions, right? So reduce means that you have to reduce the cooling demand. Then the third solution approach that are being used, that is called the shift. Shift means, so you are shifting from one particular solution to a alternative solution. Suppose there is a shift from one energy source to the alternative energy source. So currently, suppose the particular cooling devices, it is using electricity from a coal-based power plant, or the grid electricity we are using. So if we are shifting from grid electricity to a renewable energy based electricity, so it will fall under this shift approach. Then also there is a shift from the refrigerant type. So if I talk about all these refrigerants, they are having currently that the refrigerant that we use, those refrigerants have high global warming potentials. So there is a under this few international treaties, what is called Montreal Protocol, or the climate change related treaties. So now there's a shift from conventional refrigerants to alternative refrigerants. The alternative refrigerants, those refrigerants have low global warming potential, as well as they don't have any impact on the ozone layer. So all these measures will come under this shift part of it. Then the fourth pillar, that is called the improve part of it. Improve, that means we have to improve the equipment efficiency as well as the operational efficiency. So when we talk about the equipment efficiency, we will talk just simply improving the energy efficiency ratio of a particular equipment. But when we talk about the operational efficiency, it basically relates to how you are managing all your equipment, how you are maintaining all those equipment, that good service practices, all those things will come up. If you can adopt good servicing practices, then definitely there will be a improvement in the operational efficiency part of it. Then the fourth part, the fifth one, that is called leverage. So this is a kind of new approach that is currently being followed. So individual, nowadays, there is a collaborative approach that is being followed. So different countries, they are coming together. So on a not only an individual country basis or individual company basis, they are doing developing technologies, developing business models, or etc. to transit towards the sustainable cooling solutions. As a regional approach, they are following. So different countries, suppose the South, all these Southeast Asian countries, they are coming up together. They are doing research on some kind of a sustainable technologies. So it's a kind of, partnership kind of a model they are following, cooperation they are following. As Mahabharata mentioned, there is a cooperation that I am working on that is called EU-India Clean Energy and Climate Partnership. So it's a partnership between the 22 European countries and then India. So they are doing research and development for different alternative technologies, whether it is renewable energy based technologies, energy efficient technologies, or different climate proof technologies they are working on. So it's a kind of leveraging the partnership from different countries, cooperating between different countries, and they are going, moving towards sustainable solutions together, not as an individual country. So this is all about this, 5 solution approaches, the countries they are following to reduce the cooling demand and transitioning towards the sustainable cooling solutions. When I talk about the sustainable pillars, right? The technology, services, policy, and then financial. So all these 5, sustainable cooling solutions that can be integrated to one particular pillar, right? When we talk about the technology, this technology can be categorized into 2 parts. One is the passive technologies and active technologies. Passive technologies basically, it's related to the building design, the shading, insulation, airflow, etc. So it's more of a related to how to reduce the cooling demand, which can be achieved through the designing of a particular building, right? The second strategy that technology type that is called the active cooling technology. So active cooling technologies can varies from a fan to the district cooling systems. So it includes all the equipment efficiency as well, the refrigerant types, the energy consumption pattern of a particular technology, the particular equipment. So that's how the technology part is divided, the passive and then active technologies. On the services part, basically it talks about the preparation and operation. Preparations means when you transitioning towards a sustainable cooling solutions, so you need some sort of a skills. So because you are moving from one set of technologies to the next generation of technologies, so you have to prepare yourself. So you have to develop your skill force. So there is a skill development that is required, particularly on the service practitioners or technicians, right? So that is called preparation. The operation, it's mainly involved the operation and maintenance of these new technologies. So I know the business model, the kind of business models that you are adopting to provide access to affordable cooling solutions. So nowadays, I would like to mention here, nowadays there is an innovative business model that is being followed that is called cooling as a service. So like, the electricity you are getting, right? All this, the distribution and transmission companies, they are basically responsible to provide electricity to your households. You are basically an end consumers, right? Like this utility companies, the distribution and transmission companies, there are companies who are basically, providing chilled water to each and every households. Basically, the end consumers, they don't acquire or they no need to invest on the air conditioner. They don't have to invest in the air conditioners. They simply, they will take the chilled water or the cooling from the utility companies. So it's a kind of, innovative business model. Basically, customers, they will only pay for the cooling that they will receive it. The the electricity per unit basis, you are, paying to the utility companies. So similarly, for a per unit basis, per tons of refrigeration that you are getting, so you will pay to the utility companies, right? So that kind of a new business model is being developed, and then this kind of a model is still, most of this particular model is being followed in Gulf countries as well as the African countries. Also, they started, developing this kind of a model, right? Then the third pillar that is called the policy aspects of it. Policies can be the regulatory policies like developing building codes, the standards for appliances, then import export control of different conventional type of air conditioning systems, then information related policies like levels, right? The air conditioners, we have 5-star levels air conditioners, 3 stars level air conditioners. So it's about the information related, it's giving an information to the consumers so that consumer are aware what whether they are using an efficient air conditioner or an inefficient air conditioners. So it's related to information related policies. Then incentives, it can be financial incentives or non-financial incentives. Financial incentives, right? If you are giving some sort of a discount to a efficient air conditioner, that is a kind of financial incentives. Then the financial side of it, so it can be a funding can be providing some sort of a grant or subsidies to a projects or any kind of programs. Then fiscal incentives or can be it's a tax incentives. Suppose there is a tax reduction, GST reduction on a particular efficient product, that is called tax incentives. Or any reduction of import export duties can be called as a financial measures. So all these 5 pillars you have to take into account while developing a sustainable cooling solutions. So there are different aspects of it. So in today's presentation, I'll basically focusing on the climate aspects of it, when we are talking about the access to clean and affordable cooling solutions. So I will just on the clean part, I will be talking about the climate aspect of it, how this climate impact of a particular the cooling equipment is being estimated. And as I told you, there are different segments of cooling. One is the space cooling of it, then the mobile air conditioning, then refrigeration, and then cold chain part of it. So if you see present scenario, almost 57% of the cooling that is being contributed by the space cooling part of it. So I'll be talking about the space cooling part, focusing on the India side of it, right? So first I will talk about the climate impact of cooling. So if I talk about climate impact or impact of a cooling, it is basically twofold. So it impacts on climate as well as the ozone layer. So climate impact, basically it's due to GHG emissions due to the use of the energy in that particular air conditioning equipment or cooling equipment, also together with the refrigerant leakage from the product. So as I told you, most of these conventional refrigerant that are being used in a refrigeration or air conditioning equipment, they do have high global warming potentials, right? So whenever there is a leakage of refrigerant from a particular product, so it contributed to the climate change. And also the kind of electricity that is being used in the air conditioning or refrigeration equipment, mostly it is a grid electricity. And as you know, the grid is dominated by coal-fired power plants, so it impacts on the climate. And this climate change impact is being measured with the global warming potential, right? Then there is an impact on the ozone layer itself. So because of the refrigerants that we are using, they have the potential to deplete the ozone layer. So that's how, because if there is a refrigerant leakage from the system, so it impacts on the ozone layer, it depletes the ozone layer, and this ozone layer depletion is measured by a term called ozone depleting potential. So ozone depleting potential is basically a measure of how much damage a chemical or a refrigerant can cause to the ozone layer, right? So first I will talk about the emission part of it, the GHG emissions, right? How this as I told you that climate change is basically because of this GHG emission due to the use of energy and the refrigerant leakage. So first I will talk about the GHG emission part of it. From any air conditioning equipment, basically the total GHG emission, it is divided into 2 parts. One is, the first part is called direct emission, and then the second part of it is called indirect emission. So indirect emission It's basically the emission due to the use of energy consumption. Okay. And the direct emission, there are three parts of it. One part is that is called the manufacturing emissions, in-use emissions, and disposal emissions, right? The manufacturing emissions, when we are manufacturing air conditioning equipment. So when we first fill the refrigerant in that particular equipment, when we charge the equipment with refrigerants, so some percentage of the refrigerant that is leaked, from that particular equipment. So suppose for an air conditioner equipment, if I talk about 1.5 tons of air conditioner, so it consumes around 1 kg of refrigerant. So when we charge that equipment with the refrigerant, a 1 kg refrigerant, some percentage like 2 to 3% of refrigerant that is, leaked during the filling process. So that particular emission, that is called the manufacturing emissions or assembly emissions, right? Then the second part of it, when we use that particular air conditioning or refrigeration equipment on an annual basis, there is a continuous leakage of the refrigerant from that particular equipment. That basically called in-use emissions or refill emissions. Okay. And the third part of the emission, that is called the disposal emissions. So once the product's lifetime is over, so suppose for a particular air conditioner, the lifetime is around 8 to 10 years. So once the lifetime is over, that particular equipment is disposed of, right? So during the disposal process, whether we are recovering those refrigerant or we are just letting it, just throwing it. Okay? If you are practicing the recovery process, then definitely the emission would be lesser. But most of the time in India, we are not practicing any recovery of the refrigerant from that equipment. So we are simply just disposing of. That means that the total the refrigerant which are there in the equipment, so slowly it will went out to the environment. So that means there will be an emission. That particular emission is called disposal emissions. So if I talk about countries like India, they are not practicing any recovery processes. So the emission would be around 80 to 90% of the total, the charging amount. So if we are practicing any recovery practices, then the emission factor would be around 10% of the total, the refrigerant quantity that is being filled in that particular equipment. So that's how it's the total emission is being calculated for a particular cooling equipment, whether it is a refrigerator or whether it is the air conditioner. So these are the two types of emission that is actually covered while you develop a particular emission inventory for a country from the cooling segment. So there are different equations that is being used. So if I talk about the direct emission, as I told you, there are three types of direct emission. One is manufacturing or assembly emissions, or in-use or operation emissions, and disposal emissions. Then for the indirect emissions, basically, you need to have the number of equipments, that is called the stock data. Then you need to have data related to cooling capacity of that particular equipment, the coefficient of performance that is required, average runtime hours that is required, also the emission factor of a particular electricity. So if you are using the grid electricity, you need that emission factor for that grid for that particular grid. And similarly, for direct emissions, there are different types of emission factor that is being used, like this K, X, Q. Those are the emission factors. For any assembly emission factor, that is around, as I told you, 2% of the total refrigerant that is required for a particular equipment type of. And X is basically, the annual leakage amount, that is approximately, depending on the type of the equipment, that is, it varies from 10 to 20% annual leakage. Then for the disposal amount, whether we are practicing any recovery practices or we are not following any recovery practices, it depends on, it varies from 10 to 80%. So if we are not following any recovery practices, the emission factor may be up to 80%. So if we are practicing any recovery practices, then it can be 10% only. So that's how we calculate the emissions from any cooling devices. So these are the few data requirement as I have already talked about. So if we have to estimate country level emissions from the cooling sector, then you have to have total country level stock data. How much air conditioning equipment that particular country have in operation. So what are the new sales data that is required on an annual basis? The sales data basically it means production as well as import and export data that is required. Then initial refrigerant charge and then refrigerant distribution in different, there are different types of refrigerant actually. So you need to have the refrigerant distribution as well. Emission factors I have talked about, product lifetime, average cooling capacity, coefficient of performance. Then sector growth rate is required. So you are not estimating the emission inventory for a particular period. It's over a for a long-term period you are estimating. Just like we did the project for MOEFCC, we have estimated the emissions from 2017 to 2050. So you have to have that growth projections. So what kind of growth rate that needs to be taken for this emission estimation? So you have to reach out to the different stakeholders. You have to take their opinion, right? And also annual runtime hour that is required, and then emission factor for the electricity, that is tons of CO2 per megawatt hour. So these are the basic few data that is required to estimate emissions. Now I have already talked about this emission part of this, basically the climate part of it. Now I'll talk about the ozone layer depletion part of it. So as I told you, all these refrigerant that currently we are using, they do have ozone depleting potential. Basically, they deplete the ozone layer if they are released to the environment. So there are international treaties that basically control the use of refrigerants, which are ozone depleting substances, that are basically called ODS. So basically, from the international perspectives, so there is a convention that is called Vienna Convention. So the basic objective of this Vienna Convention was to promote cooperation through systematic observations, research and information exchange, and adoption of legislative and administrative measures for reducing the ozone layer depletion. So this was basically adopted in 1985, and it entered into force in 22nd of September 1988. But nowadays, people are not talking about the Vienna Conventions because the second treaty, that is called Montreal Protocol on Substances that deplete the ozone layer. So it was agreed on 16th of September 1987, and it entered into force in 1st January 1989. So now there are almost 200 countries. They are as part of this Montreal Protocol on Substances that deplete the ozone layer. And the basic objective of this Montreal Protocol is to gradually phase out the consumption of ozone depleting substances. So this consumption, so when I talk about the consumption at a country level consumption, okay, so they have to, on an individual country level, they have to phase out the consumption of ozone depleting substances. So consumption basically it measured through import minus export plus production for any particular country. So there are different amendments. I mean, since 1989, so there are various amendments under this Montreal Protocol. One is 1990, that is called London Amendment. So basically during the London Amendment, so if you can recall, initially I think 10-15 years back, the refrigerant that we were using, that is called CFC11 or CFC12, CFC, that is called chlorofluorocarbons. So actually chlorofluorocarbons, basically they are completely phased out by 2010 in developing countries, including India. So that's how nowadays this particular CFC11 or R11 that is not available in the market. So under this Montreal Protocol, under the amendment of London Amendment, that was being phased out in 2010. So then there are 1992 Copenhagen Amendment. Basically this Montreal Protocol, it deals with all ozone depleting substances, and these ozone depleting substances are being used not only in the refrigeration and air conditioning sector, they are also used as a pesticides or in other sectors like methyl bromide and HBFCs. They are basically pesticides. And in finally 1999, that is in the Beijing Amendment. So another type of refrigerant that is called HCFCs, they have included as a controlled substances on the Montreal Protocol, and they have, I mean, all these the countries, they have decided to phase out HCFCs. So even as of now, HCFCs are being used as a refrigerant in our air conditioners. In the most of the air conditioners, you use, I mean, in room air conditioners, R22, we call it as the R22. This is basically HCFC refrigerant. When there is a phase out of CFCs, so these HCFCs came into the picture. Okay, so basically R22 they replaced CFC 11, and now under this Montreal Protocol, this HCFCs, the R22 is being phased out. And when there is a phase out of HCFCs, then people has to think about some new alternatives. So there is a new refrigerant called HFCs. They came into picture, right? Now what happens basically, all these CFCs and HCFCs, they are having both global warming potential as well as the ozone depleting potentials, right? But with HFCs, they do have global warming potentials, but they don't have ozone depleting potentials. So it doesn't have any impact on the ozone layer. That's what actually, when the countries, they have started implementing this HCFC phase out, so they allowed HFCs came into the market because it doesn't have the ozone depleting potentials. But HFCs, they do have high global warming potential, even higher than these HCFCs and of some of these CFCs. So then people started talking about how to phase out or phase down. I mean, for HFC, it is not called phase out, it is called phase down. So how to phase down these HFCs? So when you talk about phase out means completely 100% phase out from the market. And when we talk about phase down, basically it's around 80% of phase out. So 20% is basically that is allowed, they are allowing countries to use it because of some, in some other areas. So during the Kigali Amendment in 2016, so the international communities, again, they have decided to phase down HFCs. So you can see from CFCs to HFCs. So initially it was CFCs. Because of this CFC phase out, then HCFCs, they came into the picture. But even HCFCs, they were having, ozone depleting potentials and then global warming potentials. So they have the international community, they what is called, they started talking about phase out of this HCFCs. When they have started implementing HCFCs, the HFCs came into the picture, the hydrofluorocarbons, right? Hydrofluorocarbon, they don't have ozone depleting potentials, but they do have high global warming potential. Then again, they have started, talking about phasing down of HFCs. So this is called basically the refrigerant transitions. So I'll talk about it. So if you see from CFCs to HCFCs, then HFCs. Now people have started talking about. So if we have to implement the HFC phase down, then the market should have some kind of an alternatives, right? So there are alternatives. So those alternatives should be, green, because when we are talking about reducing ozone depleting potentials or reducing the global warming potential, then you should have some kind of an alternative solutions, which are basically called as a low global warming potential, low GWP, or non-ozone depleting potential based refrigerants. Now people have started looking for these new alternatives. So before going ahead with this new alternatives, I'll just briefly talk about different phase out schedule of this under these HCFCs and CFCs. So there are different chemicals, they are considered as the controlled substances under Montreal Protocol apart from these refrigerants. So CFCs I have talked about. There are 5 species of CFCs. They are considered as a group 1 Annex A, right? There are halons, other, carbon tetrachloride, other chemicals are also there. So as far as the refrigerants are concerned, these are basically CFCs, HCFCs, and HFCs. So there are different 18 types of HFCs are considered as a controlled substances under Montreal Protocol, and countries, they have to phase down these HFCs. So I will talk about this HFC or HCFC phase down schedule. So this is the phase down schedule for the HCFCs. So these are being implemented. These are basically called HCFC phase out management plan, or in short, it is called HPMP. So if I talk about when we talk about the non-Article 5.1 parties, basically these are the developed countries, and Article 5.1 parties, these are the basically developing countries, including India. So if I talk about India, so India has already, for any HCFC phase out schedule, so baseline level is basically the average HCFC consumption for the year of 2009 and 10. Suppose for India, their baseline level is like their consumption, average consumption, HCFC consumption for the 2009 and 10. So schedule is like this. India, they have already freeze their consumption towards the baseline level in 2013. They have reduced 10% of their consumption from the baseline level in 2015, 35% reduction that has already been achieved in January 2020. Now actually India is working towards reducing 67.5% by 2025. And this particular stage, the 10% reduction stage, that was called basically HPMP stage 1, 35% reduction, that is called HPMP stage 2, and 67.5% reduction, that is called HPMP stage 3. Now India is in the process of achieving this particular stage, and 100% reductions basically they have to achieve by 2030. So complete phase out by 2030. So India basically they are doing in that particular directions. So in initial, for this 10% and 35% reduction target, they took that foam manufacturing sector. Even the foam manufacturing also, the HCFCs is being used. So they have targeted to the foam manufacturing sector, and then they replaced all these HCFCs with some new alternatives. Now for this HPMP stage 3, for the 67.5% reduction, they are basically targeting the air conditioning sector together with cold chain. So there are few alternatives available, so I will talk about it. And so basically they are targeting the refrigeration and air conditioning sector, including the cold chain part of it. So they will, India will definitely achieve this particular target. Now, in the previous slide, we talked about HCFC phase out. Now in this particular slide, I'll be talking about the HFC phase down. So similar like, HPMP, that HCFC phase out management plan, though countries, they have to, phase down this HFCs. So if I talk about HFC phase down, so countries are basically divided into 3 groups. One is that non-Article 5.1 parties, basically they are the, developed countries. Article 5.1 parties, group 1. So these are the developing countries, except few, few countries which are basically called, hot climatic country. So Article 5.1 parties, group 2. This is again the developing countries. Basically, it includes, all these few countries from the Gulf side of it, and then India as well. Like, group 2, Bahrain is there, India, the Iran, Iraq, Kuwait. So these are the countries basically from the group 2 countries. So India has to follow this Article 5.1 parties, group 2 phase down schedule of the HFCs. So if I talk about, so India has to reduce their HFC consumption by 10% by 2032, 20% by 37, 30% by 2042, and 85% reduction by 2047. That's how it is basically called, phase down, not phase out. So because you have to reduce only 85% only, not the 100%, because some remaining percentage you have to allocate for some of the areas where HFCs, there is no alternative for HFCs. Okay. So as I told you, there is a transition from CFCs to HCFCs and HFCs. Then there is a need for some kind of a non-ODS or low GWP based refrigerants. So when we talk about non-ODS or low GWP based refrigerant, there are few alternatives available. Those alternatives are basically categorized as natural refrigerant, like carbon dioxide, ammonia, hydrocarbon, HFOs. HFOs basically hydrofluoroolefins. So they do, all these refrigerant, they don't have any ozone depleting potentials, but they do have global warming potential. But this global warming potential is very, very low as compared to HFCs, HCFCs, and CFCs. So we'll talk about this. But before going ahead with this different, what is called new alternative refrigerants, we'll just briefly talk about the space cooling demand in India and how it is growing. What would be the implication on the climate point of view? So that we will just briefly talk about it. So if I talk about why there is a demand for cooling in India. So if I talk about, there are two folds actually, the reasons. One is the temperature increase. In last 1.5 decade, we have seen almost 10-11 warmest years during 2005 to 2019. Increase in maximum temperature is around 1 degrees and average temperature increase is around 0.61 degrees. So when there is a temperature increase, so there is a increasing in the demand of the cooling. Similarly, this is also because of there's a rapid expansion of the construction sector, particularly from the residential building side of it and then the commercial building side of it. So we have done this analysis actually. So if I see, from 2017 to 18, residential built up area, it was around 15 billion meter squares. So it is expected that by 2037-38, it will go up to 28 billion meter square. So similarly for the commercial built up areas, in 2017-18, it was 1.2 billion meter squares, and then it is expected by 2037-38, it will go up to 3.1 billion meter squares. So with this rapid expansion in the construction sector, so there will be a higher penetration of air conditioner. So if I talk about in 2017-18, the air conditioner penetration is only 8%. So this is a household penetration. Only 8% of Indian households, they do have air conditioning equipment. But we are estimating that by 2037-38, this penetration may go up to 40%. Similarly, for the commercial building side of it, this is based on the built up areas. 26% of these areas in 2017-18, they do have air conditioning systems. And but we are expecting by 2037-38, it may go up to 54%. So when there is a demand in the cooling, so definitely we can see from 2017 to 18, the space cooling demand in India, that is including both residential as well as commercial buildings, it was around 67 million tons of TR. 67 million TR, tons of refrigeration. So in 2037-38, it is expected that it will go up to 653 million TR, and then by 2049 and 50, it may go up to 2140 million TR. So it is approximately 32 times increment from 2017 to 2018. It's a huge growth that we are expecting. So if we see this kind of a space cooling demand, then definitely there will be a growth in the energy consumption. So if I talk about in 2017, we have estimated around 84 terawatt hour of energy consumption for particularly in the space cooling segment. And in 2037, it may go up to 435 terawatt hour. By 2050, it may go up to 1,545, which is approximately 18 times increase from 2017. If there is an increment in the energy consumption, definitely there would be a kind of growth, or it will contribute to the total emissions. The total emission, it includes both direct emission as well as the indirect emissions. So we can see in 2017 from the space cooling sector, the total emission was around 86 million tons of CO2 equivalent. And with this amount of growth in energy consumption, and then together with the refrigerant consumption, we can see by 2037 it may go up to 247 million tons of CO2 equivalent, and by 2050, which would be approximately 605 million tons of CO2 equivalent. That means around 7 times increment from 2017 level. So if we have to reduce this amount of emissions, then definitely we have to use some sustainable cooling solutions, which basically uses natural refrigerants, or as well as which consume less amount of energy, right? So these are the few aspects when we talk about the technologies which uses natural refrigerants, as well as different energy efficient equipment. So basically there are two factors that affects the space cooling demand or space cooling segment, which can have possible impact in reducing both greenhouse gas emissions as well as energy consumptions. So these technologies are basically divided into, as I already told, there are passive design strategies as well as active strategies. So passive design strategies, that's basically related to the building design aspects of it, so which are basically used to reduce the cooling demand, right? And active strategies basically related to the cooling devices or cooling equipment, and it's related to, when you talk about providing some sustainable solutions under active strategies, it's more of a related to improving the efficiency, whether it is a operational efficiency or equipment efficiency. So passive design strategies that deals with reducing the cooling demand, and active strategies that is related to improving the efficiency of that particular cooling equipment, right? So there are some passive design strategies. I don't have much idea on this passive design part of it. So passive design strategies that can be implemented both in new buildings as well as existing buildings. So some of these strategies are listed down. Suppose for new buildings, we can possibly talk about building form and orientation part of it, building layout, then sustainable site planning, etc., etc., right? Also we can talk about using some low energy building materials, the kind of cement that we are using. Possibly we can look for some alternate cement which have lesser impact on the climate part of it. Then existing building side, it's very difficult for existing building because you have to completely change the layout and everything. This is not possible. Possibly we can think about improvement in the building wall or roofing side of it, the windows and glazing part of it. So these are the few measures that can be adopted under this passive design part. When we talk about active strategies or technologies, so active strategies, technologies for the space cooling part, it is divided into three technology categories. One is refrigerant based. When you talk about refrigerant based, like the room air conditioners, chillers, those technologies fall under the refrigerant based. There are few non-refrigerant based technologies like fans, evaporative air coolers, right? Those are basically non-refrigerant based technologies. Some the third part, that is called not in kind technologies. This is a kind of terminology, is basically the MOEFCC, the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Climate Change, they had provided. So these are technologies basically not used in a conventional manner. So those technologies are basically called as a not in kind technologies. It's basically the radiant cooling systems, ground source heat pumps, evaporative cooling, vapor absorption machines. So those technologies basically fall under these not-in-kind cooling technologies. So we will talk about these technologies. So first we will talk about the refrigerant-based technologies. So any refrigerant-based technologies, when we analyze that particular technologies from an environmental point of view, whether those technologies are environment friendly or those technologies can be called as a clean technologies. So we looked at different parameters. So first parameter that is related to the energy efficiency, whether that particular technology is energy efficient as compared to the baseline technologies. Second parameters that is related to the commercial availability, whether those technologies are commercially available or whether those technologies are at a pilot scale. So if they are commercially available, then usually we suggest that particular technology to that country. Then third parameter that is very critical parameter that is called safety parameters. When we talk about safety, we looked at the safety aspects of the refrigerant. All these refrigerants, their safety aspects is being measured with two parameters. That is one, flammability and toxicity. The flammability, the ASHRAE 34 2010 safety group classification is there. So all these flammabilities and toxicities are being measured with this classification standard. So this, for the flammability, there are 4 classes. The class 1, basically they are the refrigerant like R410A, R134A, they don't have any flammability issue. The class 2L, basically it's a mild flammability. Then class 2, again the lower flammability, and class 3 is a higher flammability. Now, most of this natural refrigerants, right? As I told you, on the natural refrigerant, there are carbon dioxide, ammonia, there are hydrocarbons, HFOs. Hydrocarbons are, they are good refrigerants with respect to energy efficiency gaining, environmental gaining, etc. But there is an issue of flammability. So they are basically class 3 refrigerant, highly flammable refrigerants. So that is the main issue. Then on the toxicity part, I mean, these are classified with toxicity level 1 and level B. So if level A, that is, they don't have those refrigerants are basically not toxic in nature, but for toxicity level B, they are basically toxic in nature. Like ammonia. Ammonia is a very good refrigerant, and historically, it is a proven refrigerant. It is being used in all these industrial applications, cooling applications. But ammonia, there is no flammability issue. It's a B2L. I mean, mildly flammable, but it's highly toxic in nature. So safety natures that needs to be taken care of while choosing any particular refrigerant or any particular alternative, suggesting any alternative for a cooling equipment. Then also you have to estimate the environmental gain. Environmental gain, that means in terms of GHG reductions or in terms of ozone depleting potential, that definitely you have to take into account. And lastly, the system cost and then the operation and maintenance cost. Because when we talk about the sustainable cooling solution, that we are talking about clean as well as affordable cooling solution, right? So if your investment is very high, definitely you are offering a solution to your customers at a higher cost, which is probably not affordable for that particular customer or consumers. So therefore, the system cost and operation cost that needs to be taken care of it. It should be as low as possible so that you can provide an affordable cooling to your customers or client. So that's how these 5 parameters are being taken into consideration, are analyzed while suggesting any alternative solutions or any solution for refrigerant selections, right? So I'll just give you a brief about the refrigerant-based solution. So if I talk about, as I told you, I mean, refrigerant-based solution, mainly the room air conditioner as well as the chillers. For the room air conditioners, the type of refrigerant that is being used, in 2020, we did a study. Basically, in all these sales, the new sales data for a room air conditioners in India, approximately 50% of this new equipment, they use the refrigerant called R32. And R32 basically it's a HFC based refrigerant, but relatively it has low global warming potentials. If I then 30%, that is R410A. R410A, again, this is a HFC based refrigerant, HFC blends, but it has high global warming potential around 2000, 2500 or something like this. But R32, the global warming potential is only 675. Then R22 basically a HCFC based refrigerant, it is hydrochlorofluorocarbon, which is basically being phased out under HPMP phase 3. As I told you, 65.7% or something like this, that needs to be phased out by 2025. So all these air conditioning, room air conditioner sector that is being considered under this HPMP stage 2. That's why manufacturers, they are shifting towards R32 or 410A. So mostly they are shifting towards R32 because R32 is slightly they have lesser global warming potentials as compared to R410A. Then only 2% is R290. R290 basically it's a hydrocarbon, and as I told you, hydrocarbon, they do have the potential of flammability issue. So that's why there is a market acceptance is very less. And only one manufacturer, they produce R290 based room air conditioner in India, that is the Godrej. So they have already produced around 125,000 or something like this air conditioners annually, which is based on R290. And as I told you, as a new refrigerant, I mean non-ODS or low GWP based refrigerant, if you can see the ODP level for all these new refrigerants are 0. That means they are non-ODS. They don't have any impact on the ozone depleting substances. But they do have global warming potentials, but lesser than as compared to the conventional refrigerants which we are using like R22, R14A or something like this. So hydrocarbon 290, it has potential, but the flammability issue, that is the major issue with this. And already the Bureau of Indian Standards, they are working on this, developing on standards which possibly, allow us to use this R290 refrigerant as in our systems. So, and there are a few other refrigerants, R441A, those are basically not commercially available. R32, the market is growing. So this particular product is basically from Japan, and the market for R32 is growing. And it was data from 2020. Definitely in 2022, the market for R32, it may go up to 80 to 90%. So completely the market will be captured by R32 based refrigerant. Then similarly for the chillers, so current refrigerant use in new sales, basically, what is called HFC 134A, one refrigerant, 410A, then 407C, R123. R123, actually, this is an HCFC based refrigerant, and this is being phased out on the HPMP stage 3. Other three refrigerant, either this is HFC or HFC blends. So all these refrigerants, they do have higher global warming potentials. Some of the new alternative refrigerant that are basically called hydrofluoroolefins. So they do have, global warming potential, which is very less. If you can see HFO 1, 2, 3, 4 JADI, mostly this is being used as a refrigerant in chillers. So global warming potential is only 7, and ozone depleting potential is 0. There are a few other alternatives. You can see R32, R717, basically the ammonia part of it. Then hydrocarbon 290, again, there is a flammability issue. Hydrocarbon 1270. These are a few alternatives, but while providing any recommendations, so you have to think about the system efficiency, what kind of cooling effect that is required. What is the application? If it is an industrial application, probably you can recommend 717, but if it is an requirement for any buildings, probably you will avoid recommending 717 because 717 is an ammonia and then it is toxic in nature. So those things needs to be taken care of it. Now, we talked about refrigerant-based cooling technologies. So, as I told you, there are few not-in-kind cooling technologies in India. So, these technologies are basically we have seen some application in India. As I told you, these technologies basically there are few recommendations from the MOEFCC side for the application of these technologies. So radiant cooling technologies, we will talk about it, geothermal based heat pumps, evaporative cooling and vapor absorption cooling systems. We did some analysis of these technologies. So radiant cooling technologies, so as we know, I mean, radiant cooling system is mostly used in commercial buildings. Basically, the chilled water is circulated through some piping loops, which is embedded in floor or ceiling of the buildings. And basically, water pass through these pipes, which absorbs the heat radiated from the buildings. And finally, that heat is rejected to the atmosphere using a chiller. And basically the conventional chiller system that uses air handling units or chillers to produce chilled water at a temperature of around 7 degrees, but radiant cooling system requires chilled water at around 16 to 20 degrees centigrade. So that's why there is a lesser energy consumption for this compressor running. So there will be an overall system efficiency level. We can see 30 to 50% of energy saving. So if I talk about total installed capacity in 17-18 in India, around 18,000 TR is installed, particularly from the radiant cooling systems. And there are various projects, and project ranges from around 100 TR to 1000 TR. And if we talk about the capital investment part of it, per TR basis, it ranges from 120,000 rupees to 150,000 rupees. And system efficiency that I have talked about, and payback period is around 3 to 4 years as compared to any air-cooled systems. Then the second low-carbon cooling technologies, that is called evaporative cooling technologies. So evaporative cooling, basically the evaporative cooler that we use normally in Delhi or other hot climatic conditions. It is based on the principle of evaporation, and that basically the principle is like that. The evaporative cooler, it draws outdoor air and it passes it through a water-soaked medium through a motor. And when hot outdoor air is passed through this water-soaked medium, heat from the air is extracted to evaporate the water, and finally it reduces the air temperature, and also simultaneously produces the cooling effect, but also it increases the humidity level. So therefore, evaporative cooling technology is mostly effective in hot and dry climatic conditions, like Delhi, or any in NCR in North Indian part of it. So we usually see, I mean, dry climatic conditions from the month of Feb to up till June. And during that particular season, we can use that evaporative cooling technologies, but this is not recommendable in a warm or humid climatic conditions. And depending on the climatic conditions, an evaporative cooler can reduce the outdoor air temperature by 10 to 15 degrees centigrade only. And if you can see from the energy saving perspective or energy efficiency perspective, the energy savings is around 50 to 80% as compared to any air-cooled systems. And payback period is around 1 to 1.5 years. So there are different types of actually evaporative cooling system. One is that is called direct evaporative cooling, and there are multi-stage evaporative cooler as well. So if it is a direct, it's a kind of air cooler only. Its cost is around 5,000 to 10,000 per TR basis. For multi-stage, it may go up to 40,000 rupees per TR. And then the third technology, that is called geothermal based heat pumps. And geothermal based heat pumps, it uses basically the constant ground temperature for both space cooling as well as space heating. As we know, I mean, temperature under this ground surface around 6 meter depth is relatively stable throughout the year, which is around 12 degrees centigrade. And geothermal based heat pumps uses this stable temperature as a heat source during the winter season, and it will act as a heat sink during the summer season actually. And what we usually use, we create closed loop systems that is under the ground surface. There is a closed looping is being created, and heat basically from the ground source to the buildings is basically transferred through this closed loop by using water as a medium. And depending on the soil conditions or land availability, the two types of geothermal based heat pump systems are used. One is that is called horizontal looping systems, and second one that is called vertical looping systems. If we see the cost of horizontal looping system, that may go up to 35,000 to 50,000 per year basis. There is an installation capital investment that is required. For vertical systems, if there is an issue of land availability, then definitely we have to go for this vertical looping system. So the cost may go up to 100,000 rupees to 150,000 rupees per year basis. And if we talk about energy savings or any emission savings, that is around 35 to 40% of energy savings as compared to any conventional air-cooled systems. Then lastly, the vapor absorption part of it. So we all know, I mean, vapor absorption cooling systems. And vapor absorption basically it's just like a vapor compression cycle only, but the compressor is that is being replaced by an absorber or generator using some kind of an water ammonia solutions, and electrical energy that is being replaced by heat energy. So most of this heat that is being the heat energy that is required to run this vapor absorption machine, that is can be supplied through industrial waste heat or natural gas, solar or biomass, something like this. So Thermex is the one of the manufacturers of which they do have installation on solar-based VAM systems. And depending upon this different types of source of energy, the solar VAMs, the cost may go up to 250,000 rupees to 400,000 rupees on a per year basis. Energy savings as compared to air-cooled systems, we can see around 40 to 60%. And payback period, particularly for a conventional type of VAM, the payback period is 2 to 3 years. But for a solar VAM, it is around 5 to 6 years because the installation cost for solar is very high because it includes land cost as well, and also the solar concentrator, etc. But there is a subsidy from MNRE. If we can avail that MNRE subsidy, the payback period of solar VAM can be reduced to 3 to 4 years. So these are the few drivers for adoption of these low carbon cooling technologies. Like as I told you, from the technical perspective, there is a growth rate we have seen in from the green building concept, trending towards sustainability, design, thermal comfort, the productivity gain, larger service life. On the financial aspects of it, people are talking about affordable cooling solutions where they can save some operational energy savings. They can get some credits from using green building rating systems, and also some policy and regulatory aspect that we have seen. There is energy conservation and building code. Different states, they have started implementing ECBCs or ECBC plus and super ECBCs. Then there is an international pressure from the on phasing down of or phasing out of refrigerants like HCFC and HFCs. There are commitments towards corporate sustainability, net zero, etc. So those basically, these are the drivers that driving that adoption of low carbon cooling technologies. And also we have seen Based on these drivers, actually, we have estimated what would be the impact of these technologies on the total GHG emissions. So if I talk about, actually, we have estimated for India. So as I told you, there is an emission of around 605.5 million tons of CO2 by 2050 from the space cooling segment in the baseline scenario, basically the business as usual scenario. But we have estimated, we have created actually two scenarios. One scenario that is called, actually three scenarios. The first scenario that is called intervention scenario, then another two scenarios that is called low carbon scenario 1 and low carbon scenario 2. In the intervention scenario, basically what we have considered that there will be an aggressive transition from current refrigerant to low GWP based refrigerant, and as usual business as usual improvement of efficiency in the air conditioning equipment. Then there will be a reduction in the cooling demand because of ECBC adoption, the energy conservation and building code adoption, and better operation and maintenance practices, as well as the refrigerant recovery practices. That was basically considered under the intervention scenario. The not-in-kind penetration of not-in-kind technologies are not considered under the intervention scenario. So if I talk about intervention scenario, the emission in 2050, the emission from 605 to 0.5 million tons, it will reduce to 454.8 million tons. Now in low carbon scenario 1 and low carbon scenario 2, what we have additionally introduced, that the penetration of different not-in-kind cooling technologies. So the penetration is like this. In low carbon scenario 1, the penetration in 2017, the penetration was in 0.23% of the total cooling load, and we have considered different level of penetration based on the stakeholder consultation. Like in low carbon scenario 1, you can see the penetration has gone up to by 15% in 2050, but in low carbon scenario 2, basically the penetration level has been increased from 15 to 20% in 2050. Similarly, for 2030, 0.84% to 10% we have increased. So this is purely based on the stakeholder consultation. Also, we have looked at the different drivers that we had talked about in the previous slide. So based on that, we have estimated the emissions. So if we talk about in low carbon scenario 2, there would be a possible of around 17 to 80% reductions from the baseline level, the emissions from 605 to 339.7, and approximately not more than 35%, 40% of achievement that we can, that is possible in the low carbon scenario 2. And that's how actually we concluded this particular study. So I think that's all